State of Wisconsin versus Kyle Rittenhouse. As to the first count of the information, Joseph Rosenbaum. We, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty. As to the second count of the information, Richard McGinnis, we, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty. As to the third count of the information, unknown male, we, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty. As to the fourth count of the information, Anthony Huber, we, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty. As to the fifth count of the information, Gage Grosskreutz, we, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle H. Rittenhouse, not guilty.
Members of the jury, are these your unanimous verdicts? Is there anyone who does not agree with the verdicts as read? Would you wish the jury polled?
No.
Okay. Okay, folks, your job is done, and we started.
Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Social Work Race podcast. We are talking all things social work, and this channel is for students, those who are doing their ASYE, newly qualified social workers and seasoned social workers, and anyone in social services. Why? Because I like narrative. And for those of us who work in social services, we must have a story that can encourage others. I want this podcast to be a resource wherever you are in social services, to learn and grow and to share. From students getting their assignments done, being on their placements, to the highest level professionals sharing their experiences through narrative, dealing with all topics that are on hand. If you want to be a part of the show, just email me at thesocialworkrace.com and we'll have a chat. Thank you for joining again. I tell you what though, I just want to share this with you. I have got a goo cheesecake, which, and I'm not sponsored by anyone. I wish I was. But this will be destroyed, or should I say, I'm gonna punish this cheesecake with a spoon shortly after this podcast. But thank you for joining. I wanted to deal with a topic which I had trouble kind of entitling, and so I've called it Reflections on a Movie, Kyle and Brexit. Reflections on a Movie, Kyle and Brexit. And I'll open this podcast with a kind of a discourse on who I am and where I've come from. As you all know, or you should know, at least from the thumbnail and the image on the podcast, I'm a black male. I was born in the 70s. Tell you a bit more about me. I'm an introvert, but I love to hear people's stories. I love to have conversations around people's journeys. I love that. I mean, love. I like to hear how people transition from one career to another, or even just make their way into career. I love to hear why people change the way they think. Why did you choose this religion? Why did you choose this pathway? What made you change? I love it. And I love people. So although I don't enjoy so much large groups, although I grew up in church, I love people. I love black people, and black is a broad term. I love white people. I love Asians and anyone else between and beside. I'm looking today at, how discrimination impacts professionals. So I'm going to give it to you from my personal narrative, my personal perspective as well. I know what racism looks like. I've experienced it just a few years ago, very, very directly in a professional setting. In fact, you've heard on a previous podcast, a couple back. I can't remember which one it is, but I've received this prejudice, not racism, with lots of stereotype I've experienced that just in less than a year from this date. But I love people, and I've experienced real negative, challenging behavior, discriminatory and prejudiced behavior from black people, all races. I grew up in London. I've experienced love and challenging behavior, racism, discrimination from white people too. I have white folk that would stand and take a bullet for me, and me for them, as well as black. And wherever you're from, that's how we do where we come from, because we just don't do color as such. So I love people, and I know who's for me and I know who's against me. But growing up in the 70s, I was born in the 70s, but my memory begins really in the 80s. We were trained to walk correctly in a system that was against us. I want you to kind of grasp what I'm saying. Our grandparents learned from their parents, who learned from their parents who were slaves, how to conduct themselves as a minority or as the enslaved. And that has passed its way down to me, 4th, 5th generation from slavery. It's still there. It's still strong. And as my grandparents will tell their stories of what it was like to grow up in the UK in the 50s, they had to learn to live a certain way and conduct themselves a certain way in this country, the UK, as a part of the Commonwealth, to conduct themselves in a way that would bring the least heat. And they trained their children, who were my parents, and my parents in part have passed some of that on, just in part, have passed some of that on. And so we were trained to live and walk in a society that really didn't trust us, or we were taught that at the very least. And to compound that, what I am talking to you about today, it was not spoken about when I was a child. And it wasn't till black people were dying in the hands of the police regularly that we were able to have this conversation, and inquiries were launched into the system. And that's how we understood the whole term of institutionalized racism. But you have to understand that, like myself and the generation before me, my uncles and aunts and parents, they were taught to walk in silence, receiving all levels of discrimination and prejudice. So you can bet that you will carry some of that into your practice, into your profession, into your career. We have carried this into our careers. And if you haven't experienced racism or discrimination before, or have much of an understanding of it, I want you to understand that, or to get your head around the notion of what we might carry as we live in everyday society as minorities. It's not just black people, it's Asians too. And even more recently, Europeans, which is interesting, which is a slightly different issue, but again, receiving discrimination. How do they function in daily life with this, and how does it carry into their conduct and how they interact? How do we carry this? And so this week I had some news, I'll come to it in a moment, but I had some news which really raised up a lot of frustration in me. Deep frustration that I thought was dealt with. I reflect on 3 incidents. This was me driving home a couple of nights ago, driving home after listening to the news. The news raised up some skeletons that were created from hatred and from discrimination. I'm going to share 3 of them with you. My first experience, which really caused me to, I think it was my first experience of hatred. I was about 12, and it was after watching the movie Mississippi Burning. If you've ever seen that movie, you will know my anger came through. Movies set in the deep south of North America, probably in the 70s, thereabouts, where a black man's daughter was raped by white men who were racist. I don't remember so much if she was murdered. It's been a while now. But I was about 12 years old, and after I watched that movie, I hated white people for a long time. Yep, I've taken on trauma that probably doesn't belong to me, but I took it on because that movie was a reflection of reality. That was my first experience. My second experience, and it's not a second of many, do you know what I mean? Of all the experiences I could choose, I thought, you know what, I'd share this one with you. Wow, this was Brexit. How did I feel knowing that half the voting populace in the UK, the country that I am born and bred, 52% didn't want to be in Europe? Look, it's not just about not wanting to be in Europe. What was my concern? What did I feel at the time? And why am I feeling this? I suddenly felt that this country was not my country. Why did I feel so ostracized? Why did I feel so marginalized? It was a sudden feeling. It doesn't matter if it makes sense. It just felt that way. I think that was 2016, right? It was a lot of narrative of we want our country back. I don't know what they meant by that. I do and I don't. I don't think they even know what they're talking about when they say it. But Brexit was a shock to me when I saw that it was half of the voters, and it was a high turnout of votes, the highest in history, I believe. So a lot of people want their country back. Now, don't get me wrong, a lot of people voted, or some voted, should I say, on economic or political, on an economic or political basis. But I personally believe that a lot of people voted because they felt that something was being taken away from them, and they felt marginalized themselves. And their expression of that was get them out. Why did I feel like a part of that number that they wanted to get rid of? So that for me was a wake-up call. It may or may not be true, but I felt like this was not my country. I just live here. Now, I haven't carried that forever. That feeling has kind of dissipated. But in the back of my mind, or should I say, the back of my mind has been informed. That's my subconscious. It still feels that way. And then this is the news that really riled me. I don't know if you've been following the case. After the George Floyd protests, there was a period of riot. And this young man, Kyle Rittenhouse, this is the story. And he has, this is the story. This young man, he's 17 years old. He has obtained a rifle, a rapid fire rifle, whatever they call it. We call it, straight up machine gun. He's got a machine gun. And he is called by an adult to go down into the riot area to protect his friend's business. Listen to this. They have solicited a minor. He's underage. He does not have the right to own or use a firearm, especially of that power. This young man's loaded up. You see him in the videos. He's happy as Larry. He walks through the streets as calm as, geared up as, to apparently protect. But he wasn't protecting the business, right? You could see him in the videos. He's walking up and down the streets. He thinks the police are on his side. He has no concern for what he's doing. And he ends up, when people try to disarm him, he's the only one that killed anyone that day. And as they try to disarm him, he shoots and kills 2 people and shoots 3 people. Those riots, even, you could say those riots, those protests were peaceful. And he came and killed. And the thing that got me was, and as they say on road, he bust case. He was found not guilty on all charges. Explain that. So, how did I feel about that? Well, I've had many experiences of racism and discrimination, and I, with my own eyes, and I am seeing between different counties and boroughs, because I used to work in youth justice. I see the sentencing disparities between different courts in different parts of the country. And after hearing, I'm fed up of seeing minorities given a heavier sentence. I'm fed up of seeing it. I'm seeing this because I've worked in predominantly white and predominantly minority areas. I see the difference in how they're sentenced. And it burns me. And so when Carl got off, I said to myself, hold on a minute. The person that called him should have been in court. How can you ask a child to go and protect your business? He's a child. Remember, I was so angry when I heard the news. I had no more trust, at least for a moment. There are people serving life for selling cannabis. So justice was served, maybe. It's how you want to look at it. I mean, my issue isn't that he got nothing, so much so that than those who are serving time for less because of the color of their skin. You know, I teach my children not to discriminate. I've spent extensive time with my son, who's now 14, reasoning with him. This is why we don't judge people by how they look. And if we do judge people for how they look, we mustn't treat them according to how we feel. And it comes through this extensive discourse that he understands that he has to be careful how he deals with people. And I have had to be careful how I deal with people, even though not all people have been careful how they've dealt with me. And I teach my kids that very lesson, that I have received racism, they will receive less, but it will be there. It will be an issue for them at times, but less so. But we mustn't treat them how they treat us. And so we as social workers and we who are on the front line, we have to push past the trauma that we've experienced or are experiencing to love and care for those who hate us as well as themselves. This podcast was really, this particular podcast was really to get us to consider. within ourselves, whether we are a minority or not, whether it be your sex change or your gender change or whatever you want to call it, or whatever part of the world you're from that is now receiving all the prejudice and discrimination. If you work in social care, do not treat them the way they treat you. And if you carry that baggage, process it, deal with it, be honest with it, and embrace your journey and use that energy to get a better result. But don't carry it the way that your oppressors have been carrying it. And by oppressors, that means anyone who wants to put it on you. Anyone who wants to put you down for being what you are, that you didn't choose to be. We as professionals, we lead the world because we push past all of these obstacles into a place of love and grace so that the world can be a better place. Take care of yourselves. I look forward to bringing you the next experience soon. Take care.